Good morning, everybody. Today we come to Psalm 59, which is another lament in a long string of laments. And what makes this particularly interesting is that we know the backstory. We know the background of the psalm that David is writing. You see it in the superscription that introduces the psalm. It says as follows: when Saul sent men to watch David's house in order to kill him. Now this takes place during a particular period where King Saul is becoming insanely jealous over the rising popularity of young David. Let me read you the story as it is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 19, beginning at verse 11. It says, Saul, that's King Saul, sent men to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. Now notice the similarity between the very first line and the superscription that precedes Psalm 59. But Michal, David's wife, also Saul's daughter, warned him, if you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be killed. So Michal let David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at its head. Now, you remember when you were a kid, you used to do that? You'd put pillows underneath the covers to make it look like you were sleeping there so your parents wouldn't realize you're downstairs watching TV when it was too late. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, he is ill. Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, bring him to me in his bed so that I may kill him. But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and at the head was some goat's hair. And of course they all went, ha, ha, ha. Saul said to Michal, why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped? Michal told him, well, he said to me, let me get away. Why should I kill you? And then it says David fled. Now, couple things I want you to notice this morning in our devotional is a couple interesting features of Psalm 59 and then some underlying principles or lessons that we can take from the Psalms in general. Lesson number one is this: Psalms have both a specific context and a moving context. Let me show you what I mean. The psalm opens up with the psalmist's prayer against the backdrop that we have just read, with four imperative commands: deliver me, be my fortress, or literally it could be translated, set me on high, in other words, so high in a fortress, in a high place that nobody can reach me. And then in verse 2, deliver me again and save me. And then notice the four ways the foes, David's foes, are described. My enemies, those who are attacking me, evildoers, and those who are after my blood. And then in verse 3, we read, see how they lie in wait for me, fierce men conspiring against me. And then when you come to verse 6, you're going to see a very interesting image. It said, they return at evening snarling like dogs. That image is going to be repeated a little bit later in verse 14. But I want you to remember, in the ancient world, dogs were not these cute, cuddly little domesticated pets. They were snarling scavengers. And you get the picture of, these kind of Rottweilers whose teeth are being exposed as they're snarling, and there's a pack of them. It's a picture of danger. Well, you can see the specific context here going back to 1 Samuel 19. But I want you to notice what happens now in verse 5. You, Lord God Almighty, you who are the God of Israel, rouse yourself to punish all the nations. Now the context, if you're listening closely, if you're following closely, just move from one of Saul's many attempts to kill David to a national context where the psalmist is praying against the national enemies of Israel. And Jewish commentators down through history have pointed out that the Israelites used Psalm 59 when they were in captivity, praying for justice against their oppressive conquerors, the Assyrians, and then the Babylonians, and then the Romans. So the book of Psalms have not only specific context, but they have these moving contexts where you can adapt a lament to apply to a person's changing circumstances or current circumstances. Now that's just one of the features that makes the book of Psalms so attractive and so universally loved, because they are general enough that you can kind of use them in multiple contexts. Now, here's lesson number 2. This genre of psalms, this category of psalms, can be called laments, or they can be called trouble and trust psalms. Now, you know, you're familiar with the term laments. We've said that 70% of all the psalms are laments, and you know, the thing I like about the term lament is that it reminds me that life is filled with pain and brokenness and heartache. Scott Peck actually wrote a book called The Road Less Traveled, in which he began his opening line of the book was, "Life is difficult." But then the second line said, "But once you understand that, life gets a little easier." Now, of course, the whole point is our expectations. If our expectation is that life is just going to be a walk through the park, well, we're going to be disappointed, because life in a broken world is constantly filled with trouble. But if we understand that life in a fallen world is filled with pain and sadness and brokenness, then we're not going to be thrown off so much. We're going to say, well, that's kind of what you expect in a broken world. Now, what I don't like about the term lament is that it is overly pessimistic. And these psalms were not meant to be simply laments, because there's more to a lament than lamenting. There's also these little expressions of trust, which we've seen in the past, and we see here again. These little brief bursts of trust. Let me just read you a couple examples. Right in the middle, for instance, of the psalm, you read this in verse 9 and 10. "You are my strength. I watch for you. You, God, are my fortress, my God, in whom I can rely." And then at the end of the psalm, verses 16 and 17, right after the second reference to snarling dogs, he says, "But I will sing of your strength in the morning. I will sing of your love, for you are my fortress, my refuge in times of trouble." Notice that little phrase, "in times of trouble," which brings us to the second term. You can call them laments, or you can call them trust in trouble psalms. And you can see where it comes from. So he concludes by saying, "You are my strength. I sing praise to you. You, God, are my fortress, my God, on whom I can rely." In other words, even in times of trouble, he is saying, it turns me to God, and when I turn to God, I express my ultimate trust in him. Well, I hope these psalms are helping you as you learn to pray along with David.